Hello, everyone. We are broadcasting live from Chisinau, Moldova. It's great to be here today, and welcome to our live audience here in Moldova and to our online viewers joining us through the GTDF Global Platform. If you're watching us online, please make sure to introduce yourself in the chat by sharing your name and location. I'm Stuardo Herrera, and I'm a Senior Technical Advisor in Digital Technology and Innovation at Palladium. And I also serve as the Digital Advisor to the USAID-funded Data for Impact project in Moldova. Today, we are very excited to engage in a discussion about human-centered digital transformation in Moldova, balancing opportunities with risks. We'll explore how the current digital momentum and transformation translates into government services designed to support the most vulnerable populations. And our panel today features experts from various sectors in Moldova and globally, each offering unique perspectives. So let me start introducing our distinguished panelists today who bring diverse perspectives to today's conversation. Please join me in welcoming, first of all, Mr. Igor Chisca. Mr. Chisca serves as the head of the Child Rights Protection and Family with Children Policy Department within the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. His responsibilities include developing and implementing legislation related to child rights, adoption, abduction, family services, and combating child abuse and violence. The department aims to prevent institutionalization of children in residential care facilities and ensure access to quality social assistance for Moldovan children and families. Additionally, Mr. Chisca has worked to strengthen professional capacities for collecting accurate data on children in the child protection system, and he's currently promoting the regulation framework for the child protection information system. Welcome, Igor. Then we have Mrs. Diana Zaharia. Mrs. Diana is the Chief Administrative Officer of the e-Governance Agency and has a leading role in the modernization of government services project funded by the World Bank in Moldova. She has been with the agency team for 7 years, focusing on services reengineering, digitalization, and aligning public services providers to a modernized model. From 2021 to 2023, Diana also coordinated external assistance in the Deputy Prime Minister's Office for Digitalization. Prior to joining the agency, she worked with development partners, including the British Embassy, EU delegation, and UNDP on projects related to strengthening democracy and good governance in Moldova. Thank you, Diana, for being with us today. And then we have Mihail Gorincioi. Mihail is an attorney and legal expert that focuses on human rights and international legal frameworks. He holds degrees in law and European studies from Alexandru Ioan Cuza University in Romania. And throughout his career, he has managed projects related to rule of law, human rights, education, migration, children's rights protection, and digitalization. Mihail has actively contributed to civil society projects and conducted doctoral research in human rights. His passion for technology drives him to explore AI's legal implications and promote digitalization for upholding human rights and social justice. And last but not least, we have joining us online, Lisa Poggiali. Lisa is a senior democracy, data, and technology specialist at USAID, where she designs programs, develops policy, and conducts research to foster digital democracy and address digital repression. With over 20 years of experience in technology and democracy, she has conducted research on the impact of emerging and established technologies in East Africa. Her work has been published in several peer-reviewed journals and edited volumes, including Digital Media and Democratic Futures and Cryptopolitics, Exposure, Concealment, and Digital Media. Lisa holds a PhD in anthropology from Stanford University. She got her master's degree in the anthropology of development from the School of Oriental and African Studies and her bachelor's degree in anthropology and human rights from Columbia University. Welcome to this panel, Lisa. Okay, so let's start the conversation, and maybe let me start by framing a little bit about what's happening in Moldova right now, and specifically about the exciting point in history in which Moldova is. So as we know, over the past few years, Moldova's IT sector has experienced significant growth. Now we've seen how at the same time, the Ministry of Economic Development and Digitalization has set an ambitious goal to achieve 100% digital state by 2030, which, by the way, based on what I heard on last week's Moldova Digital Summit, that might happen even earlier. And also, Moldova is currently pursuing EU accession, which will bring opportunities for economic integration, institutional support, and alignment with the EU's regulatory framework, which at the same time will also help improve best practices in areas like cybersecurity and data privacy. And we cannot forget that there are also persisting challenges, social and economic challenges, despite these exciting developments that Moldova is going through. And just to grab an example here, and we're going to focus initially the conversation today just to have a very specific example of something, of a social problem that is happening in Moldova, and it's family separation. Especially when children at risk are separated from their caregivers or from their parents, which is a pressing issue driven by widespread poverty, limited job opportunities, and inadequate social safety nets. These factors often lead to significant out-migration and family separation. And in the social sector, this is even, it gets worse because there are also problems with alcohol abuse, domestic violence, and stigma related to disabilities. These strains impact the social services infrastructure. And if we add that the recent influx of Ukrainian refugees, including nearly 48,000 children, just added further pressure to the social system. So that's why through the USAID funded Data for Impact project, the project is supporting the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection in developing the Child Protection Information System. This system leverages digital technologies to enhance data management and case management for children at risk. And with that, ultimately, it will improve the quality of social services that are provided to families by managing the data and tracking better how the services are being provided to them. So I think that this system exemplifies how designing and implementing digital solutions along with relevant policies can protect vulnerable populations in both the real and digital worlds, while also taking into consideration that the data that is managed through these systems, it's also, it's sensitive, right? So proper measures should be put in place. And as we know, children, along with women and girls, are often the most vulnerable, making a human rights approach essential in strengthening digital ecosystem. So with that as framing, I would like to start maybe asking Igor. The Ministry of Labor and Social Protection has been through an ongoing reform, specifically known as the Restart Reform, which aims to streamline processes, reduce paperwork, and enhance service accessibility and convenience. How do you see that technology, specifically digital systems like the Child Protection Information System, enhance the quality of social services provided to children at risk?
Dear colleagues, thank you very much for this opportunity to be here, to be part of this discussion. It's very important to change some view in this field. But with your permission, I will speak Romanian to offer more information about this subject. Please.
Colleagues, honored audience, honored Stuardo, you are hit it in the nail in the head, as one could say it. You mentioned about the vulnerable groups, which are specifically assisted, protected by the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection in this regard. Yes, indeed, in the vulnerable groups, vulnerable groups, they require special care. You mentioned in your introductory speech about the Restart Reform. Let me give you some updated information about the Restart Reform and then get to the IT system in the area of child protection and explain to you what are the benefits of this system in relation to vulnerable children. So, I will start with some background information. All right. Currently, we can say that in Moldova, the area of social assistance is not digitized at all. What they use is we use old methods, outdated methods, in order to collect data so that the data would be processed and then used for decision making. So, when we were looking at the situation of children in Moldova, when we were thinking about developing child-friendly policies in Moldova that require special attention, special assistance and care, we started looking into the actual situation. So, the first step we need to take is to visualize data, to understand where you are, answer a couple of questions of what you want to get, where do you want to get to, and what do you do for that, and then together with our partners, with our colleagues, a number of partners, specifically USAID and our D4I partner, we have made a decision that given that in Moldova data used to be collected in line with using an outdated method. I mean, initially you collected information on paper, and then someone would collect, analyze, compute, calculate all of this data, so you wouldn't make a correct analysis. I mean, the accuracy of data would be doubtful. And then we've evolved, and then we started to use Excel with formulas, tables, etc. And then we made the next step. We started to use Cobot Toolbox to visualize data in Power BI. And we knew that we were doing all of that in order to get, as a result of it, an IT system in area of child protection. All of these steps were taken in order to gather experience, in order to determine the indicators that need to be collected from the field, from our first-line colleagues. And then, together with our colleagues, development partners, colleagues from the ministry, we started to lay the foundation of the child protection IT system. We started talking about the conceptualization of the system. So we made step by step so that we have an IT system which would correspond to the superior interest of the child. Of course, we have highest interest of the child. Of course, we have complied with all the steps in this area. And then, so that was happening back in 2022. That took time, digitization of the processes, etc. And in 2024, on January 1st, we started the Restart reform that you all know about in the area of social assistance. And this reform has four major objectives. These four objectives are based on the data that were collected from our first-line colleagues, because any reform you need to do, you need to visualize, analyze, and make a decision based on data. So, again, we have gone through the whole procedure. We've gathered the data with difficulty, using outdated methods, but at the end of the day, when we saw the pool of data, we determined clearly the concept of the reform in the area of social assistance. I mean, Restart. We had the first objective, which is as follows. Vulnerable population must have access to social services and social benefits. Two, in order to comply with this objective, we need to have social services which would be in line with minimum quality standards and which in turn are based on the needs of the citizen. Next, The third one, in order to comply with the first two objectives, we require, or we need, that we have enough professional people, qualified and well trained, so that their background would be in line with the identified needs of the beneficiary. And the fourth objective is actually digitization of the social assistance system. So that was my background. And from here on, we start the digitization of the social assistance system. We've made the first step. When I'm saying we, I mean the ministry as the central authority in the area of child protection. We made the first step by developing this IT system with the support of the D4I project, so that we, based on that foundation, based on that concept that was thought through with the active participation of all stakeholders in the area of child protection, so that now we are at a situation when we can pilot the IT system in a number of districts of the country, so that we could see what is the feedback of our first line officers, and at the same time, not just pilot, not just analyze the data, but we invest in human resources. So we have had an array of trainings for first-line officers. Some of them were trained already on the usage of this, on how to use the system. The system is based on a number of modules, so that we would be able to see how the government actions affect the welfare of the children. Now we can talk about the benefits of this IT system. Your question is, how would the system help the government of Moldova or the Ministry of Social Protection and Labor in relation to the children? So this IT system, first of all, allows to visualize the up-to-date situation. So on life on this day, not based on quarterly, semi-quarterly situations. We know the situation as of now. Two, we can talk about the fact that that would strengthen the system of child protection by providing high-quality assistance in relation to the interests of the child. The next benefit is that this system would provide the possibility to reduce or prevent adverse situations for children. This system will help the government of Moldova to de-institutionalize children. I mean, take out the children from residential services and provide appropriate protection as appropriate into the family type services. Also, another benefit that from this IT system is that given that the system is built in a way that it has an analytical module, it will deliver data which will be filtered by certain categories, by certain localities. We'll see the actual situation in one or another region, and it will for sure help us make decisions in relation to policy making related to child protection. So that is very important, and not least, this system will help very, very much, and will save the time of our staff. Time that was lost to prepare reports and then send them to the government, to the agency, to the ministry. And one more benefit, I can talk a lot about benefits because that really contributes to us cutting less trees, because there will be less paper.
That's great framing, Igor. I really like how you started with the restart reform and putting the focus on that. In the end, the main objective is to improve the social services and to improve the life of in this case children at risk as as a vulnerable population. So maybe with that, I want to move now to Diana. We've heard right now as an example how the child protection information system is used as a tool to provide better social services to, in this case, children at risk. As you know, the Child Protection Information System, there are other systems in the government. And also the government just launched last week during the Digital Summit, the Evo app, which will not only be used by the government, but it's actually a new bridge between the government and the citizens. And we know that the Evo app will be used by not only one portion of the population, but by everyone, right? Including vulnerable groups. So how do you see that vulnerable groups be considered in a broader digital strategy by the government, especially like with something like the Evo app, for example?
Thank you, Stuardo, and congratulations. Hope now it's fine. Yeah. Thank you, Stuardo, and congratulations to USAID and Palladium for the flawless organization of this event. Well, your questions are broad and at the same time quite specific. Let me start from the very beginning, speaking a little bit about the Moldova digital transformation strategy, since you also asked about what other strategies will also tackle about vulnerable groups. Well, Moldova Digital Transformation Strategy 2023 and 2030 envisages actions and especially training for various types of population, but with a particular focus on the people from vulnerable groups such as ethnic minorities, women and girls, elderly, youth, and so on. People with disabilities, of course, and others. E-governance agency, the institution that I am representing, is one of the key implementers of this strategy. And our role, I would say, is multilateral in addressing the needs of the vulnerable groups in terms of digitalization and digital technologies and digital skills. And when I say it's a multi-angle involvement and actions of the EGA, I mean, first of all, what we do, for example, in the past years in the processes of re-engineering and digitalization of the services. Yeah, we call, while combining these two terms, re-engineering and digitalization, we say we modernize the services. So first of all, we stopped digitalizing the services as they were. Starting with 2018, we are first of all, we selected first of all, together with the government, the most, let's say, the most necessary public services for the citizens, for the population, and we put those services through a process of re-engineering, meaning that we rethought each and every business process in a public service delivery. And we didn't do this all by ourselves. We also involved the population and the people from vulnerable groups, engaging them in focus groups, asking them what they would see different and more convenient for them, for the government to provide a public service, how they would see it in terms of minimizing their effort and also decreasing their costs for the public service delivery. And only after such a consultation process, but as we used to say, this is a co-creation, co-design process, we embark into the digitalization. So by such, we make the modernized services more accessible, more impactful, more efficient, more qualitative, and we also reduce the costs ultimately we reduce the costs for such public services. Then another thing that e-governance agency is responsible for, and here is a direct link with EVO application that was launched at the Moldova Digital Summit last week, is the public services portal. Because the EVO application, as a backbone of the EVO application, stays the public services portal. On that portal, we have 642 public services, out of which 284 are electronic services. So any citizen that has an electronic signature or a mobile signature can access directly on the platform the public services they need. Furthermore, they can also receive directly in their citizens portal, we call it M-Cabinet, the product or the result of that public service delivery, be it, for example, a duplicate of a Civil Status Act, be it a criminal record, or be it a document from the state archive from, I don't know, 1922, for example. They can receive these documents directly in their M-Cabinet. Furthermore, if this is a person with disability, or if this is a person that doesn't have the possibility to come to the public service provider to take this document can be delivered via government service M-Delivery. E-governance agency fulfills its role as a trainer for enriching or for enhancing digital skills of the population. And here I'm not referring only to simple citizens, but primarily to citizens who are from vulnerable groups. And I would like to mention here one of the trainings that we consider it to be a great success. The training was fulfilled together with our development partner UNFPA, where we organized the training of trainers for young people from around 26 regions of the Republic of Moldova that ultimately worked and trained their grandparents, the other people that they know who are aged 63 and plus. So all in all, the result was that we impacted around 1,000 elderly who became much more aware about the digital possibilities and digital technologies and modernized services that the government of our country can offer. Except for that, we are also working on training for women and girls, especially for women and girls who suffered from domestic violence, training them not only in the digital technologies, but also in digital entrepreneurship, guiding them in their further professional selection and so on. Of course, EGA does not do it solely. EGA does it in partnership with a number of development partners. Another opportunity for our citizens and also for those who are from vulnerable groups are the unified centers of public service delivery that have been established all around the country in a number of 100. So the government is thinking to extend this number up to 250 in the upcoming years. So what is this, a unified center for public service delivery? Most of you have heard it in a different term, one-stop shop for public service delivery. So we established them in the rural communities, at the local level. They are part of the mayor's offices, these unified centers for public service delivery, and they serve the population and also the people with disabilities, women and girls, the ethnic minorities, the elderly, who are living into that particular community by submitting the request for public services instead of them. If this is a case, for example, if this is a person with disability, with visual impairments, for example, so that person definitely needs some assistance. So the specialist from the Unified Center of Public Service Delivery does have the role, and it's also regulated by our normative framework, does have the role and the right to submit the request for a particular public service delivery instead of that person. or that people who are working in the unified centers for public service delivery, we call them specialists, one-stop shop specialist, or in the abbreviation we call them CPIS specialists, because CPIS comes from the Romanian term Unified Center of Public Service Delivery. So the CPIS specialist also can guide the citizens on how to access public service. So, for example, if I'm looking into the statistics that we have from CPIS in the past 5 months, 52% of women have been assisted to access public services via CPIS, 54% of elderly aged 60 and plus, 26 middle-aged citizens between 45 and 59, and 20% of young people aged between 18 and 44. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, we cannot collect the data in terms of percentages right now for the people with disabilities and also for Ukrainian refugees. But we do have records that such people have been provided assistance through CPIS, and we are working right now on our information systems for CPIS, so that for the future the information system can provide this data in percentages and very clear numbers. Except for that, I also want to say that on the public services portal, we are working right now and doing our best to associate the services into live events. In practice, that would mean that, for example, a person who is with disability and requires support for health services can access one time a live event of such, and can be displayed all the necessary services that can be received at once. The same goes for the people who retired and need to submit their request for pension and for other social benefits. The same goes for the children, and the same goes for the people, for refugee and displaced people. So I hope I managed to reply to all of your questions, but in case there are more, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Diana. Yeah, no, I think it's very interesting to see how in the development and in the design of these government services, different vulnerable communities are being considered. And I think that now with the government and the strategy in general that the country is having on its digital transformation journey to bring these services even closer to the population, these types of approach will be even more important. And that's why I want to then maybe ask Mihail about accountability and trust. So with the context that both Igor and Diana gave, how do you envision the role of the civil society in this space? How could civil society be more engaged from your perspective as a human rights lawyer? How could civil society be more engaged in designing these government services?
Thank you, Stuardo. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here and for the opportunity, for the great opportunity to express my thoughts on such a actual, very important and relevant topic for the Republic of Moldova. For sure, I will start with the fact that the role of civil society here in this context, it's of a huge importance. Of course, I will try to start with the example from my field. I'm coming from the legal field. So I will prefer to say that for having a good result, we should act in partnership. So here, for instance, on the stage, we are representative from the government, from the agencies, from the civil society. So from my perspective, in order to ensure the good results of the reform, of the digitalization, we should act in partnership. So we should be somehow partners in this process. Coming back to to your specific question, Stuardo, I will focus my answer into three main aspects. Even it was very hard for me to synthesize all the implications of the civil society in this process. But I will start with monitoring and reporting. I think the civil society organizations, they can act as watchdogs to ensure the digital policies and technologies respect human rights. And this aspect, as my colleagues, they previously mentioned, it's very important. Even the government and agencies, they are trying to do their best in order to have their own teams for the monitoring and evaluation of different processes. I do believe, and I'm actually fully confident, that the involvement of the civil society in this process, it's very important, and the government can take an opinion from different sides in order to improve their processes. Educate and empower. Because today we discussed about the digital literacy and the lack of digital literacy in Moldova, and particularly when it comes to vulnerable people, as you mentioned before, it's very important to involve civil society organization in different projects together with the public authorities in order to provide digital literacy programs and projects for the population, to raising awareness about digital rights and the responsible use of technology. These aspects are of a huge importance from my experience, perspective, sorry. Another aspect, very important and related with vulnerable groups at the same time, it's about advocacy. For the policy change, because here I can see in Moldova a huge role of civil society in this regard, and we can see cooperation between the government and the civil society when it comes to some lobby activities for inclusive digital policies that protect vulnerable groups. And I firmly consider that, for instance, when the government is organizing some trainings in different districts in Moldova with the involvement of experts from the civil society organization, it can be done in a very efficient manner, let's say like that. How can civil society be included in this process? We have different ways, of course. Here we can have as I mentioned before, the collaborative approach, when governments involve civil society organization in the early stages of policy formulation. And myself, and I know a lot of colleagues from the civil society organization, that they were involved in this kind of stages of policy formulation, even when we are talking about digital reform. Public consultations, of course, it's a very important aspect that we should take into consideration, and regular consultation with civil society organization can gather feedback on digital initiatives, allowing for continuous improvement and adaptation. So these aspects leads me to the idea that we have let's say, a real democracy in the country when the government is involving the civil society in the public consultations in order to ensure the transparency of decision-making process. And of course, the third point here, how civil society can be included, is related to funding and support. And here I was thinking about two very important aspects when sometimes they can act in a mirror. For instance, there are some ways when the civil society together with international community can contribute in order to help the public authorities, and at the same time we can think about the way when the government is providing tools for civil society to get some funds in order to advocate for different important aspects related to digitalization. So we can take here an example, the 2% let's say, program when the people that are paying taxes in Moldova can somehow redirect 2% for the civil society organization, and they can advocate for different human rights initiatives. If just a few words about one of, from my perspective, very, very important aspect I should highlight and emphasize here about accountability and trust. And we, together with all the panelists that they were before, we spoke about the importance of transparency. And from my perspective, civil society organization, they can ensure that digital processes and decisions are transparent, and they can contribute together with the government in this very important, let's say, process. Other aspects about the trust, I was thinking about community feedback mechanism. From my perspective, this aspect, it's very important, and I will explain you why, and I will try somehow here to elaborate a bit even from the human rights perspective. Because I know that all the government agencies, different public institutions, they are trying to collect feedback, and we have seen that when the government implemented different policies, they are trying to do their best in order to collect some feedback, some ideas even from the vulnerable people. Here, I think it's very important to involve even the civil society organizations, because okay, when we are trying to collect some information to build a new policy, it's one thing, but it's very important to receive some feedback mechanism during implementation of the policy. So here, for instance, I just tried to make an exercise and to find different ways how the government is trying to collect feedback from the population. And I have seen only one way is a kind of chat box when somebody can write a comment or a recommendation for the specific authority. And here I was thinking from the human rights perspective, and I had an idea. We can, for instance, let's take an example, a blind person, when he or she wants to recommend something or to give a feedback to the government. Here we can think about providing different ways of collecting feedback from the population. For instance, we can give the possibility for recording of 30 seconds message and to send to the government in order to express her or his ideas. But the most important thing is to provide, to have some public servants who has like time and duties for analyzing all these messages and to take into consideration. And another important thing here, when I can see the involvement of civil society, it's related to the data privacy policies. And here we know that we can take into a consideration as a very high standard the GDPR, but here I can see the role of civil society in order to promote the GDPR and in order to offer trainings both for the officials and for the community.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will stop here.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Mihail. Super interesting point, and maybe building on that, Lisa, and how, specifically on how civil society can be better involved in the design of government services. What are some specific examples or frameworks in other countries that you've seen in which civil society has had participation in the design of government services, or maybe that hasn't happened? And what challenges have you seen in that regard?
Thanks, Stuardo. Thanks, thank you so much to the other panelists for a really rich set of remarks. And Mihail's comments actually feed quite well into the remarks that I'll give. I'm sorry I could not be there in person, especially because I know Moldova is lovely in the spring, but I'm very grateful we have the technology to enable me to participate virtually. So you've heard today, Moldova is engaging in many impressive efforts to accelerate digital transformation. And Stuardo's question of how civil society can participate more, I specifically will answer in just 1 second, but I think I want to back up a little bit and broaden the aperture a bit to focus on the theme of trust, which Mihail mentioned, and which I think is really critical, and which I've seen civil society successfully help to bring about in other contexts. So I don't want to in any way diminish other elements that are necessary for a successful digital transformation. Like many of the panelists have spoken about, technical expertise and the right technical equipment, digital literacy initiatives, et cetera, which are all really critical and they require substantial resourcing. But the main point is that if you have those ingredients present, but you don't have trust from the public, within the government, and through civil society engagement, then you're not going to be as, your systems won't be as utilized as they could be, and digital transformation will not be as robust as it could be. So there are two different ways that I think about this. There's citizens' trust in government, which has been discussed a bit, and I think this is particularly important when we're talking about vulnerable populations. So do populations believe that the government is generally working in their best interest? If they do, they're more likely to trust that the digital systems that are being set up will be working in their best interest, and they will be more likely to engage with them. So I've seen in other contexts where citizens fear that the government might sell their data they've collected to a third party, that they might use their data against them in ways that they didn't authorize. So, for example, collecting data in order to improve healthcare service delivery, for example, that then might be used in order to make employment decisions that could negatively affect some populations. So I think it's really critical to build that trust in the systems from the very beginning. And we've seen this in other contexts where digital transformation has worked quite well, like Estonia being the model that everybody talks about for good reason. There's a lot of trust from the citizenry in the government, and the Extra data exchange platform there has been incredibly successful as a result. We can also look at Ukraine, where USAID supported the DIA app, which is a similar kind of idea to EVO. And that was built at a time that the population was rallying around the administration in response to Russian aggression. And so there was a lot of trust in the government. And so this is critical. So what can be done to increase trust between government and citizens? I think Mihail gave some really great examples. Digital literacy is critical. Public consultations are critical, and mechanisms for public feedback. I also think a multi-stakeholder or collaborative approach is really critical, and a mechanism for accountability, which is related to that. And I'll talk about that in just 1 second. But the second element of trust that I think is really critical and that I've heard discussed less is trust within government. And so for successful digital transformation, I think different agencies, different ministries, different offices obviously need to share data with one another. And to do this, they need to trust the overall system and that the data that they're using, that they're sending and receiving is going to be safe and secure, and that it will be used for the purposes it's intended. And so I've seen it work best in other contexts. So for example, I was recently in Kenya, where there is a lot of resourcing and that there is an institutional kind of commitment to wherever the main data exchange platform is housed and where citizen engagement tools are managed. And that there is that building of trust internally, that there are resources that are placed towards that, so that the data can be exchanged so that the different entities will be engaged, all for the purposes of improving the overall relationship between the government and the citizenry. So the last thing which speaks specifically to civil society that I'll mention is this point about accountability and a collaborative approach. And I'm glad that Mihail mentioned civil society, because I think in the domain of digital transformation, sometimes when we talk about a multi-stakeholder approach, people just mean government and industry. And obviously government and industry are critical, but civil society, I would argue, is equally as critical. And of course, civil society is oftentimes involved to a certain extent in the policymaking process. So digital governance issues, digital transformation policies, etc. But what I've seen work best in other places is when civil society is equally as involved in the implementation. So if you think about the entire life cycle of a kind of system or an initiative, and from the point where a policy is developed to the point where there's data being collected and the system is being used by the public, and then it's continuously iterated upon. Again, I'll point to Kenya just because this is where I most recently was. There's a very robust civil society that works on a lot of digital issues, from responsible AI to digital rights, online harms. And they're very involved in policy. They were very formative in the creation of Kenya's commitment to digital governance under their Open Government Partnership National Action Plan. But civil society has been less involved there on the implementation side. So, for example, systems being set up in the health sector where there's a lot of personal information being exchanged regularly, that there's much less involvement and awareness. And so when we talk about digital literacy, I think it's not just digital literacy for the public, but also for civil society around implementation and really connecting civil society with the stakeholders who are working on the implementation, from the technical experts to the government decision makers. I'll say in particular, this is really critical to bring it back to Moldova because of the recent revision to the Data Protection Act there, which, as I understand it, was revised in order to align more closely with the GDPR and to support Moldova's accession process. And so I think civil society involvement in thinking about how can IT systems be safeguarded in order to ensure the most vulnerable are protected? How can trust be built? How should IT systems be set up? All of the questions around data storage and exchange and retention and access. Civil society is really critical to both understand those issues and to be part of those conversations, because they really are representing the citizens. The final thing I'm going to draw your attention to is the Donor Principles for Human Rights in the Digital Age, which is a framework that was drafted through the Freedom Online Coalition, led by the US and Canada, and launched last year in October. They've been endorsed by 39 countries, and they provide a roadmap for steps that donors can take, as well as other stakeholders, other governments and civil society and the private sector, in order to support digital transformation projects and digital initiatives more broadly in ways that are responsible, ethical, and using a do no harm approach. So I think they can be a useful resource for thinking about what are different elements of a kind of do no harm approach to digital transformation. I will leave it at that, since I know we are very limited on time, but thanks again.
Trust should be built not only with civil society, but also within the government, and how also digital skills should be developed broadly. We're almost at the time, so I have a challenge for you. We have a...
Sorry to interrupt. Before going into the challenge, I would also like to share some of my thoughts while listening to Mihail's speaking. I would like to, and I was very glad to hear an external expert being very much resonating with the plans of the government and the priorities of the government. In terms of community feedback, because this year we are going to start the software development of an e-democracy platform. That's going to be a digital platform with 3 modules, implying e-feedback from the citizens, and thank you for the idea of having also voice messages. I'm going to take that one from you by keeping all the rights for the offer. And also the e-survey and e-petition. So those modules are going to be under one umbrella, and I hope that they are going to serve very much to the citizens and to the civil society we have in the country. Thank you, and sorry for stepping into...
Thank you. I think that those were really important points because it's how you enable participation. So my challenge to close down the session is to say in 3 words or less. We know that we're going through digital transformation in Moldova. And by the way, thank you for Thomas Biddle from the chat who gave me the idea for this question. He wants to know what we need for digital transformation to be human-centered. We know that we're going through digital transformation, but how do we achieve human-centered digital transformation? 3 words, 4 words, maybe 5. Maybe let's start with you, Diana.
I believe I have already mentioned those words while I was speaking about the digital transformation and what we offer as tools to the vulnerable people. So 3-4 words would be co-design, yeah, enhancing digital literacy, and also keeping the human being at the center and not the AI at the center, although I believe some of my colleagues will have a different idea on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Igor?
I think 3 words will be maybe the first, professionalism, 2, maybe security, and 3, I don't know, maybe more human.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Mihail?
Yeah, I will be very, very short. Transparency, accountability, responsibility.
Great. And Lisa online?
I think it would be thinking about the approach from the point of citizen engagement at every step of the way, and all of the things that my fellow panelists just said, but that would be the big framing, I would think.
And what better way to close this session with those words? Thank you so much again for the panelists. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining online. Thank you so much for Tech Change as well, who coordinated this session. And thank you so much for the local D4I team who has been really leading this half day that we've been today talking about digital transformation and human rights and how to do it in an inclusive and responsible way. Thank you so much, everyone, and until next time.